She told me to call her madam, but every glance, every lingering touch, made me want to call her something far more dangerous, mine. The first time I met her, I wasn't ready for the effect she would have on me. She walked into the office with that kind of calm authority that makes everyone fall a little silent, even without her asking. There was nothing loud about her presence, no raised voice, no exaggerated gestures. It was something subtler, the way her heels tapped lightly against the polished floor, the way her eyes swept the room as though she saw everything without ever needing to look twice. She was in her early 40s, though age felt like the wrong word. It wasn't something that weighed on her, it was something she carried like a crown. Her posture, her elegance, the faint lines around her eyes when she smiled, they didn't diminish her beauty. They deepened it. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She simply was, and that was enough to make her unforgettable. When she stopped at my desk, I looked up and felt my pulse stutter for a moment. Her perfume was soft, nothing overwhelming, something floral with a trace of warmth that lingered like a quiet secret. She glanced at the documents I was organizing, and then at me. Her eyes were sharp but not unkind, studying me in a way that made me feel seen, and at the same time, exposed. "You must be new," she said, her voice smooth, steady. There was a faint lilt of amusement in her tone, as if she already knew the answer. I nodded, trying to remember how words worked, before I managed a quiet, "Yes, ma'am." That's when the corner of her mouth curved upward. "Not ma'am," she corrected softly, but firmly. "You should call me madam." Her words were professional, yet there was something about the way she said them that lingered in the air between us. Madam. The title was respectful, yes, but it also carried weight, formality, and a hint of distance. It was a word that placed her above me, untouchable. I should have just agreed, moved on, and kept things professional. But even then, with barely a minute in her presence, something inside me rebelled against that distance. I didn't want to see her as someone far away, someone unreachable. I wanted to see the woman behind the title, the warmth in her smile, the softness in her eyes when they lingered on mine a moment too long. And though I didn't say it then, the thought whispered through me with dangerous clarity, "I'd rather call you mine." After the first day, I found myself noticing her everywhere, though I told myself it was just my imagination. Yet it wasn't just that she existed in the same space as me, it was the way she moved through it. Every step she took had an effortless rhythm, as if the office itself adjusted to her presence. I caught myself unconsciously straightening my posture whenever she passed by, heart nudged by the faint sway of her hair or the soft click of her shoes against the marble floor. Our interactions began innocuously enough. She would hand me a file, or give a gentle nod when I completed a task correctly. But there was a rhythm to her gestures, a quiet attentiveness that felt different from everyone else in the office. When she handed me documents, her fingers brushed mine just for a heartbeat longer than necessary. It was accidental, she would likely claim, yet it left a trace, a spark I couldn't shake. Coffee breaks became small, stolen moments. She would linger by the counter, and I would find myself standing just a little too close, pretending to stir sugar into my cup while stealing glances at her. She laughed softly at my clumsy jokes, that gentle, musical sound that lingered in the air long after the words themselves. I could see her shoulders relax when I listened carefully, the corners of her lips turning upward in a smile that wasn't just polite, it was warm, personal. Even the quietest moments carried weight. There was a stretch of time when we were alone by the copier, waiting for a print job to finish. She leaned slightly, studying the pages, and I felt the subtle brush of her sleeve against my arm. A tiny touch, completely innocent in action, yet I felt it deep in my chest, a warmth, a tether, as if something unspoken had passed between us. I began to notice the little things, the faint perfume that seemed to follow her, like a memory you couldn't quite place, the way her hair caught the sunlight streaming through the windows, the calm steadiness in her posture that suggested she was comfortable in her own skin, yet somehow still searching for someone she could trust. I was beginning to understand that this wasn't attraction in the ordinary sense. It was a fascination born from nuance, from quiet gestures and unspoken understanding. And while I told myself to maintain distance, to honor the professional boundary, I couldn't help the tug in my chest whenever she was near. By the end of that week, I realized it wasn't just admiration. It was something deeper, subtle and unformed, hovering between us, waiting for the right moment to grow. And in the quiet spaces of shared office life, the accidental brushes, the lingering looks, the soft smiles, I felt the first whispers of something that could change everything. By the third week, the rhythm between us had changed. It was subtle, almost imperceptible to anyone else, but I felt it with every interaction. There was a familiarity now, a quiet acknowledgement that neither of us could, or perhaps wanted to, deny. I caught her glancing my way during meetings, the corners of her mouth lifting in a faint, knowing smile, and I realized she noticed the same spark I did. It started with small teasing remarks. One morning, as I fumbled with a stack of papers, she leaned over my desk with that confident grace that always made my chest tighten. "You're going to call me Madam forever, you know," she said lightly, her eyes twinkling with amusement. I looked up, catching the corner of her smile, and felt a mischievous impulse I hadn't expected. "Or," I replied carefully, "I could call you something far more daring." Her laugh was soft, musical, a sound that lingered long after it left her lips. She tilted her head, studying me with those sharp, warm eyes, as if weighing the risk of crossing a line that neither of us had truly defined. "Daring?" she asked, the word dripping with curiosity. "Do you know what you're suggesting?" "I think," I said slowly, leaning just slightly forward, careful to stay within the invisible boundary, "that I might be willing to find out." It was the first time I felt the pull of tension that wasn't just admiration or fascination, it was something unspoken, simmering beneath polite smiles and professional decorum. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she shared a personal anecdote, a memory of a quiet evening alone at a small cafe, her voice softening in a way that revealed more than her words. I listened, genuinely, feeling the depth of her vulnerability beneath her confident exterior. For the first time, the office walls felt like they could disappear. I noticed the warmth of her presence, the subtle shifts of her body as she spoke, the way her hand lingered near mine for a fleeting second when she gestured, the gentle rise and fall of her chest in rhythm with her words. My heartbeat synced without conscious thought to the cadence of her laughter. We left that conversation with no labels, no promises. Yet, something had shifted irreversibly. There was a quiet electricity now, a tension that hummed beneath every interaction, every glance. I found myself replaying the moment over and over, the mischievous sparkle in her eye, the gentle softness of her voice, and the daring thought that had taken root in my chest, "I'd rather call you mine." Even in that professional setting, surrounded by colleagues and deadlines, the possibility lingered, silent, potent, and impossible to ignore. A few weeks in, the connection between us had grown, yet it carried a tension neither of us fully understood. In the office, we maintained a careful professionalism, but outside its walls, the moments we shared revealed layers of emotion that words could barely contain. It was a subtle dance, proximity without touch, conversation without confession, each of us testing the boundaries of what was appropriate. One evening, after a long day of meetings and deadlines, we found ourselves leaving the office together. The streets were quiet, the city bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. I suggested we walk for a while. It wasn't planned, but it felt natural. She hesitated briefly, then nodded, slipping her hand into her coat pocket, her posture relaxed yet alert, as if weighing every step she took beside me. We walked side by side, talking quietly about mundane things at first, traffic, favorite cafes, books we'd read, but slowly, the conversation shifted. She began to reveal pieces of herself that no one at the office ever saw, the moments of doubt she carried, the subtle loneliness she tried to mask with poise, the quiet dreams she held for herself. Her voice softened, and I noticed a vulnerability in her eyes that made me feel protective, honored to witness. I wanted to reach out, to offer comfort, to bridge the gap that our professional relationship demanded we maintain. Yet I hesitated, conscious of the risk, aware of the line I could not cross. Still, our steps slowed as we approached a small park bench tucked beneath a lamppost. She sat first, her movements graceful and deliberate, and I hesitated before taking the seat beside her. The distance between us was small, barely a foot, but in that space, the tension was palpable. Her hand brushed against mine as she adjusted her coat, a fleeting contact that sent a subtle warmth through me. I felt my pulse quicken at the smallest gesture, the softness of her sleeve against my skin, the faint perfume that seemed stronger in the evening air, the way her gaze lingered a second longer than necessary. In silence, we sat together, the world around us fading, leaving only the quiet rhythm of two hearts sensing the presence of the other. I wanted to speak, to tell her how deeply her presence affected me, but I held back. Instead, I offered a quiet, attentive presence, letting her words fill the air, letting her vulnerability meet my understanding. And in that unspoken space, a subtle trust was born, fragile yet undeniable. By the time we left the park, the tension had shifted. It was no longer just curiosity or admiration, it was something richer, more profound, though neither of us could yet name it aloud. We walked back to our separate lives, the evening wrapping us in quiet anticipation of what might come next, and I knew, with an unmistakable certainty, that everything had changed. The tension between us had become a quiet, unspoken force, impossible to ignore. By this point, even the simplest interactions carried weight, the accidental brush of her hand as she handed me a pen, the lingering glance across the conference table, the subtle shift in her posture whenever I entered the room. Each gesture, each movement, felt charged with meaning, though no words were spoken. It was during a late evening work event, a formal dinner for clients, that the intensity of our connection became nearly tangible. We were seated across from each other, the room buzzing with conversation and polite laughter. Yet, amid the chatter, I found myself acutely aware of her presence. Every time her fingers grazed the stem of her wine glass, I imagined the warmth of that touch if it were mine. Every tilt of her head, every soft laugh, carried a pull I couldn't resist. We maintained appearances, of course. Professionalism demanded it. But even in the subtle constraints of etiquette, the energy between us hummed quietly, insistently. At one point, our knees brushed beneath the table, a fleeting, almost accidental contact, but it sent a shiver through me. She didn't pull away. Instead, her eyes met mine briefly, a spark of acknowledgement passing silently between us. That single glance spoke of mutual desire and restraint, a recognition that the connection we shared was as dangerous as it was undeniable. Later, we stepped onto the balcony for a breath of fresh air. The city lights stretched endlessly before us, and the soft hum of traffic below created a private cocoon of quiet intimacy. We stood side by side, close enough that the warmth of her body brushed against mine when the breeze shifted. The subtle scent of her perfume enveloped me, mingling with the crisp night air. Neither of us spoke immediately. The silence was charged, every unspoken word vibrating in the space between us. I wanted to reach out, to close the distance entirely, yet I held back. I could feel her hesitation mirroring my own, the understanding that our connection, though potent, carried risks we weren't ready to confront openly. Even in that moment, a truth became impossible to ignore: desire had settled in, deep and unyielding, entwined with a respect and care that made it impossible to act recklessly. We were drawn to each other, yet bound by caution, by the invisible walls of professionalism and perception. The awareness of risk only made each glance, each subtle touch, feel more intimate, more urgent. By the time we returned to the dinner hall, the tension had thickened into something almost unbearable. We exchanged no words about what had passed on the balcony, yet both of us knew it had changed everything. Desire was no longer quiet, it was patient, simmering beneath the surface, waiting for the moment we could finally allow it to exist fully. It was a quiet evening, the office long since emptied, the hum of the city below our windows the only background to our shared solitude. The air between us was different now, not just charged with desire, but softened by trust, by the unspoken understanding that our connection had deepened beyond casual attraction. Every glance carried meaning, every subtle gesture hinted at emotions neither of us had dared voice until now. We found ourselves side by side at the office balcony, the soft glow of the city lights reflecting in her eyes. She leaned slightly on the railing, and I stood close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her, careful not to close the space entirely, yet unable to resist the gravity drawing us together. Silence stretched between us, but it was not awkward, it was heavy with potential, each pause an invitation to reveal what had been quietly building for weeks. I spoke first, not with bravado, but with honesty, letting my voice carry the weight of every thought I had kept to myself. "I've been thinking about you," I admitted, "more than I probably should. More than just admiration or respect. There's something between us I can't ignore." My words trembled slightly, betraying the vulnerability I had been holding back. Her eyes softened, and for a moment, she didn't speak. Then she turned to me, her gaze steady, unflinching, yet warm. "I know," she said quietly. "I've felt it too. Every time we're near, every little touch. I can't pretend it's not there." Her voice was calm, but it carried the weight of her own restraint, the careful balance she had maintained between desire and caution. I felt a shiver run through me as she spoke, as if her acknowledgement had unlocked something inside me. Slowly, I reached out, just enough for my fingers to brush against hers. She didn't pull away. Our hands hovered, fingertips lightly touching, hearts beating in a silent rhythm that seemed louder than the city below. We didn't rush, didn't need to. A shared smile, a lingering glance, a subtle squeeze of fingers said everything words could not. In that quiet, suspended moment, the barriers of age, profession, and caution melted. We were simply two people, fully seen, fully known, and fully drawn to each other. By the time we stepped back into the office, the air between us had changed. There was an unspoken promise in our proximity, a gentle certainty that we could explore this connection, slowly, carefully, but without hesitation. For the first time, the unspoken thought that had haunted me since day one surfaced fully in my mind: I want her to be mine, and I think she wants the same. The confession didn't end in fireworks or grand gestures. It ended in quiet understanding, in a mutual vulnerability that made the heart ache in the best possible way, leaving us both anticipating the next chapter of a story we were only just beginning to write. The days after our confession were filled with a quiet, steady rhythm that felt both new and familiar. We didn't rush into grand gestures or public displays. Instead, we explored the space between us carefully, savoring each moment, each small touch, each shared glance that carried meaning far beyond words. The office, once a place of tension and unspoken longing, had become a stage for subtle intimacy, where every brush of hands or shared laugh reminded us of the connection we had nurtured. It began with small routines, walking home together after late meetings, our shoulders brushing as we navigated the city streets, sharing coffee in the break room, our knees occasionally touching under the table, lingering just a heartbeat longer than necessary when handing each other documents. These moments, seemingly mundane, carried a warmth that made ordinary life feel extraordinary. One evening, we found ourselves on a quiet park bench, the city lights twinkling like a soft backdrop to our conversation. She leaned slightly against me, her head resting near my shoulder, and I felt the steady warmth of her presence, a reassurance that went beyond words. Our hands found each other naturally, fingers intertwining in a gesture that was both tender and deliberate. There was no rush, no urgency, just a quiet acknowledgement that we belonged in this space together. Her laughter, soft and unguarded, echoed in the night air, and I realized how much I had longed for this, moments of genuine ease and comfort with her. The boundaries of age, status, and professional decorum had melted into insignificance. What remained was the simple, undeniable truth of our affection, deep, patient, and rooted in trust. Even mundane interactions carried new depth. A casual brush of her hand across mine as she passed a document, a gentle touch on the small of my back when guiding me through a doorway, lingering glances across a shared table, all were affirmations of a connection that had grown slowly, carefully, and meaningfully. By the time we returned home, there was a quiet understanding between us: this was real, this was mutual, and it was worth cherishing. The hesitation that had defined our early interactions had transformed into a comfortable intimacy, a shared secret that needed no words. In those final moments of the story, I realized the most profound truth: love doesn't always arrive with fanfare or grand declarations. Sometimes, it unfolds gently, like sunlight through a window, illuminating small, meaningful details that accumulate into something extraordinary. She was mine, not in possession, but in trust and mutual care, and I was hers. And in that realization, with her hand resting lightly in mine, I felt a warmth that went deeper than desire or infatuation, a quiet, enduring love that promised patience, respect, and togetherness for all the days to come. If you felt the tension, the longing, and the slow burn romance between them, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more age gap love stories that will make your heart race. Comment below, would you dare call her yours?